In part 2, we conclude chapter 4, the first disciples. It is to be noticed that in the original, the article is very rarely omitted. He styles himself with obvious intention to make the name personally distinguishing, the Son of Man. Saurut equals 666, and you'll see my 603 score and 6 playlist. It was a title not common among the Jews, and not understood by them when Jesus employed it and applied it to himself. Now, what phrase that renders his Son of Man? That may not be the one. In Acts 7, verse 56, it occurs and has a special reference to the bodily appearance of Jesus as it seemed to the eyes of dying Stephen, and also Revelation 1:13. I now discover only one passage in which it is omitted, namely John 5:27. Perhaps for a reason we may be present when we reach the discussion of the passage. Now, one of the things is that these prophets, these exemplars, messiahs, whatever you call them, they're like the first of their people in a way. Because they're the revivers, and then, so to some extent the path is degraded, like they talk about the Bhagavad Gita, when the social order has fallen. I am sent, or I send, or that sort of thing. The phrase occurs in the Old Testament where it appears to have its origin. It is in Daniel 7:13, where it has been noticed that the word is not Benish or Ben Adam, but Bar Anish, which represents humanity in its greatest frailty and humility. Ezekiel is repeatedly called Son of Man, but never calls himself so. It may have been to keep him from the undue exaltation on account of his many great and glorious visions. But he is not called the Son of Man. The Old Testament writers may be said to have used the phrase to designate generally humanity in its highest ideal. It was certainly not a customary designation of the Messiah, else some false Messiah would have used it. Moreover, the people would sometimes at least have applied it to Jesus, as they frequently did the name of Son of David, or Son of God even. But, those were individuals that stood apart, right? Which latter name Jesus accepted, and upon which he was accustomed to base an argument for the superior dignity of the Messiah. See Matthew 9:27, 12:23, 15:22, 20:30 and 31, 21:9 and 15, 22, 42 and 45. There's also reference that Jesus says that he was taught 19 chapters, so fragments of some of the phrases of that may occur in the canonical Gospels or other Gospels, but it was as the Son of David that the people implored his help, and as the Son of David he did help them. The prophets had foretold that the Messiah was to come of David's line, and frequently used the name of David to imply the Messiah. The Jews cherished the name and fame of David as their most glorious monarch, the king who had done most to extend their dominions. And so they naturally came to associate ideas of secular splendor and conquest with the thought of the Messiah. Perhaps it was on this account that Jesus, when he wished to connect his person with the messianic idea, preferred to call himself the Son of Man. It lifted him from the sphere of secular to that of spiritual and everlasting life. It enlarged him from the representative of one family, a royal family, to the representative of all humanity. It realized Messiah, it idealized man, and the mission of Jesus was to break bands of churchism, conservatism, And no, conservative and liberal is not some group. People who are liberal actually are more prone to be conservatives than those called conservatives. But bands of monarchy, bands of caste, prejudice, conventionalities in his work, he was to bring himself down to all the weakness, wants, and sympathies of man. In the results of that work, he was to lift man up to himself. In regard to Nathaniel, it may be further stated that he is believed by many to be the same as Bartholomew. The reason assigned is that in the first three Gospels, Nathanael is not mentioned, while Philip and Bartholomew are constantly named together, whereas John, Philip, and Nathanael are constantly coupled, but Bartholomew is never mentioned. We may consider his real name as Nathanael, while Bartholomew, which signifies son of Ptolemy, is his surname. We learn from John 21:2 that he was a native of Cana in Galilee. Bernard and Abbot Rupert were of opinion that he was the bridegroom at the marriage in Cana. He is reported among the witnesses of the resurrection and of the ascension of Jesus, and as returning to Jerusalem with the other apostles. See John 21:2 and Acts 4:12 and 13. The apocryphal statements are that he was subsequently an apostle to the Indians, whoever they may have been. The ancient writers, using the word indefinitely, the place of his death is not well ascertained. Albanopolis in Armenia Minor and Urbanopolis in Cilicia are mentioned. It is said by one another to have died in Laconia. They all agree he was crucified with his head downward. A spurious gospel bears his name. Well, some of the Gospels are pseudepigraphal, but sometimes they're just, the Gospels of the people with similar names. Wasn't there a Gospel of Nicodemus and, some other people in the 2nd century? But they never pretended that it was anything different than somebody in the 2nd century writing something. Despite the evidences in the canonical Gospels, people like to pretend like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were not the people of the next generations. That the book of Acts was written by one of those 2nd century gospel writers.